right. Good day, everybody. Good morning. Beautiful morning here in Northeast Ontario. It is clear, cool nights, mild days, 23 to 25 degrees. Beautiful. I'm going to shoot a bit of a vid here. We're going to change the oil on this TW200. I'll show you how to go about that. And specifically the oil we're going to put in this machine. And we'll get at her. We're going to put motorcycle oil in there. And there is a difference in oil between motorcycle and automotive oils. That's just how it is. And if you're putting automotive style oil in your motorcycle, you could be doing some damage to it. And it's simply for the fact that when you look at these motorcycle oils that are manufactured today, they're different than car oils. And I had known this a long time ago, actually through my brother years ago, that motorcycle oils are meant for a wet clutch system. It's just that simple. Cars run a dry clutch, meaning that your engine oil is not part of your clutch. It's not all in one casing. A car has a crankcase with engine oil and a dry clutch, separate from the engine oil. A motorcycle has a wet clutch, which means it uses oil for the clutch and for the motor. Everything's encased in one. So your wet clutch is riding in the same oil bath that your motor's running in. So that calls for a motorcycle oil designed solely for wet clutches. And the reason being, this has different ingredients in it than an automotive oil. This has no friction modifiers in it too, to allow that clutch to slip. You don't want your wet clutch slipping on your bike, so this has no friction modifiers. The ingredients in this oil is different than the ingredients of a car. That's really all you got to remember. So, and we can get in and talk about oils all day. Oils are kind of a neat conversation, but anyway, you want something with, right there, the basic JASO, J-A-S-O, JASO MA2 rating, or the JASO rating for an automatic clutch, like on a scooter or anything like that. Those are the only real two kind of different motorcycle oils. But today, because this thing has a wet clutch and it's a standard transmission, we're running the JASO MA2. So that's the difference, you guys, between an automotive oil. Just the basic nuts and bolts of it all is motorcycle oil versus car oil. Stick with your motorcycle oil. And today we're running 1030, and you can see they highly promote the MA2 rating for motorcycle wet clutch. And Suzuki oil, running in a Yamaha. Not that Suzuki ever really manufactured any oil. But anyway, it's made to Suzuki specs, and we're going to get at this thing. We're going to dump this oil in this. So we'll get at it. We'll just get this oil drained out. I took it, I warmed it up. I always warm my stuff up first. I never drain oil on something that's cold. It's just, I don't do it. So anyway, on these T-dubs, if you have a little look, 19mm hex head on this guy. And this is your, not only just your oil drain on these T-dubs to drain the lower end of that motor of the oil, this is also your screen. So you not only have the drain, you've got the screen in here too. So these things have a screen and they have a filter. So we'll drain that out. So while that oil's draining, and you can see there is also a strainer in there. So that should be cleaned out too. We'll clean that out. And that's on your drain. You'll see there's a strainer and there's also a filter on this machine. And when I have these out, drain plug, you want to inspect that O-ring that's on there. It is not a must to change that O-ring every time you do an oil change. If the O-ring's leaking, if the O-ring's ripped, torn, pinched, yes, you should change it. But you do not have to change that O-ring every time you do an oil change. So we'll clean these up. Just clean them up and inspect them. And I do an oil change once a year just because of the kilometers I put on the bike. I don't put a tremendous amount of kilometers on it, but it does get warm in the bush and it does have its idle times. So I just sprayed it down with a bit of brake cleaner on the outside. On that screen, that will catch all your larger particulate generally from your transmission, and if everything's going good, you should have very, very minimal wear in there. You will get a bit of wear, break-in wear originally on your break-in, but after that, if you take care of your bike and you just watch how you shift it and how you ride, you should have minimal deposits of iron in there. Or metal, sorry, not iron, metal. And just give it a good once over. Just check it, just see what's going on in there. There should never be a rip or a tear or a hole in there, but you know what? Once you blow it out, hit it with a brake cleaner and clean it out. Just give it a once over and a quick... All right, so we got the drain screen done. That's all clean. Inspect that O-ring too, man. Have a look, like I say, for pinches, cracks, and if it does get excessively flat over time, whatever, a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, well, that TW's a 2016 right there. So do the math, 16 to 24 years, 22, 2 years, so it's 6 years old. I've never changed that O-ring, and I'm not going to change the O-ring unless I inspect it and it gives me an issue. And she's looking good. Okay, we got that done. So let's go to the other side and I'll show you that oil filter on these machines. It's kind of nice. Right there you got your oil filter. All right, these guys here, I think they're 8mm. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, they're 8s. And these guys here, 5. Now, I will say this, you guys. I'll have to get one. I don't have a torque wrench for these torque values on these screws, so I just put them in by touch and feel. But I looked at the torque specs, and they're anywhere from 5 to 7 pounds, foot-pounds, the torque specs on these. I got a torque wrench for the other side for doing the drain plug. All right. So you can see these guys, like I say, they were going anywhere from roughly 5 to 7 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench to go that small. So we're just going to can that idea. I'll torque them up by hand, and you got to get a small torque wrench for that purpose, because the last thing you want to do is strip these aluminum casing fine thread bolts. So it's pretty touchy. And you either get a torque wrench, and if you don't have one, you better know how to feel your way into these threads, because they are soft. There's no doubt about it, and you don't want to ruin those. Do this one-handed. And there you go. And immediately you can see, look at the length of bolts. You got 3 different length bolts in there, and they have different specs too, torque specs on them. So that's where a torque wrench is mighty handy. But anyway, there you go right there. There's your oil filter. And then you've got your O-ring on here on your oil filter cap. And you just check that too, the same way you check your drain. And you just inspect that. And make sure when you put these bolts back in, you guys, they all go in a particular spot on these oil filter side cover here. You'll notice you can't get that shoulder bolt in any one of these because it's too big, so you can't really mix up the shoulder bolt, that metric shoulder bolt. But these other guys, you'll find out they have a specific spot to go in. So you'll have to pay close attention to that when you take it apart. That's something to remember. And even when I put it together, sometimes I mix it up and you can feel your way into it that there's a long one and a short one. It's not a big deal. I like to take and wipe these covers down. And brake cleaner is one of them things where it's great to use. Brake cleaner is great to use, but you don't want to be breathing it in too much. Okay, we got that out, got our covers out, and now we will pull that filter out. And you may have to manipulate it a little tiny bit, wiggle it back and forth, because and there you go. There's your filter. Now, I'll show you something else, the key to these filters. All right, have a look at this filter. This is not a disposable filter. Well, it's disposable if you want to throw it away, but you don't have to. This is a reusable, and this is, I'm going to say, I don't know for sure, it's golden in color and everything else, but it just looks like a really fine, you can see the solder on it, some sort of brass mesh reusable. This is a multi-use filter, and it's not paper. It's not a cartridge style paper, pleated or anything like that. That is a reusable filter, and I do see a little bit of material on it at the bottom of this filter, so I'll clean that all up, and we'll go from there. So give it a shot of brake cleaner, whatever you got to clean this filter out, and then put the air to it. Very, very little particulate in here, but you know what? And this is a very fine filter, so you don't want to hammer this little guy with a ton of air. This is the shittiest brake can you can imagine, spraying everywhere before it should. Go over it a couple times, hit it with a brake cleaner, whatever you want, and you can see that mesh. Which is nice with the TW. Have a look at that guy in the light, you guys. Have a good look. You can see it's a little brass soldered screen. This is a reusable filter. Clean them up, wipe them down, blow them out, and what's that? And do the best. Get them as clean as you can get them. I'm sure by this design Yamaha had intended for multi-use oil changes out of this primary oil filter. All right, so we got the oil filter pretty clean, wiped her down. We got the oil draining out, and that's really all there is to that Yamaha filter. Nice, it's a nice filter, nice setup, reusable. And there was minimal contamination in there. Mind you, there was a little bit of contamination. I did see a little bit of metal in there, but very, very little. Typical Japanese engineering, man. It's just, that's how it is. All right, I had to get out in the light to set this. 31 foot-pounds on there, and then you just crank her. And you'll hear that wrench break. Right there. Once that torque wrench breaks, you guys, if you listen, you can hear it break. Watch the torque wrench and listen. Right there. When that torque wrench clicks like that, you know you're at your setting, which is, you may not see it. I got it at 30 pounds. It says 31. Okay, we're set at 31 foot-pounds. Right there on the torque wrench. Put her on there. And you can hear it break. So you know you're sitting at 31 foot-pounds on that torque wrench. You got your 25-pound visible and another 6 pounds. 31 foot-pounds, you're good to go. All right, so we got that drain plug in. We got the drain screen in there. And now let's go back. This is where you got to use a little bit of touch and feel, because I don't have a torque wrench. I like to wipe the inside of that housing out of there. Before I put that filter back in. And then put that oil filter back in there. And watch the way you put that oil filter in. Don't put her in backwards. Whether it would or wouldn't go in backwards and bolt up, I don't know. But you can see your oil filter in there. And you got your side cover on there, and you'll notice that there is a pressure port there. We'll assume it's a pressure port. What is that? And inspect that O-ring, because there is an O-ring in there. Make sure that O-ring is good. And then your unit goes together. Shoulder bolt goes in the bottom. You can't screw that up. And this guy, the long bolt and the short bolt, and your longer bolt, you'll be able to notice your long bolt goes to the right because it's got a long way to travel into that engine casing to catch them threads. It's got to go deep inside here. It's got a long way to go. Your short bolt right here only has a tiny little bit to go in there. So just something to watch out for, that's all. And don't crank them guys up tight. Okay, so now we got that O-ring seated, we got the cover on there, we got each bolt kind of snug. Like I said, I don't have a torque wrench, but I'm not too wound up about it because you're just feeling your way around, but you don't want to strip those bolts. And I have to get a proper torque wrench. And that's it. And without a torque wrench, I couldn't tell you what that, the feel in the wrench. I just feel my way into them threads. I will get, and I'll probably order one on Amazon just for this purpose. I should have had one already. Like I say, they're between 5 and 7 foot-pounds around here. You've got your O-ring doing your sealing for you on this cover. So you do not need to crank that thing real tight. You've got an O-ring in there that compresses. So that's why in the aluminum with the O-ring, you don't need a ton of foot-pounds of pressure on there. So anyway, that's where we are right now. Everything's sealed up and we've got absolutely no oil in it. All right. And I kind of should have done this before too a little bit. Anything that you're opening up in those casings should be cleaned up a little bit. But where this dirt can get trapped in behind this fill plug, you kind of want to blow that up so when you open that out, none of that shit falls in your crankcase. You can see the O-ring. Inspect that O-ring too. Make sure all your O-rings are in good shape. On your fill port for your oil, O-ring, again, pinch, cracks, rips, tears, leaks. That's it. Give her a bit of a wipe. Another thing too, I don't like the way these rags sometimes tear off a bit of lint. And when I'm cleaning, I see residual lint from these rags. So be careful of that too. If you see any of that from your rag, anything hanging from the rag, pull it out of there because it's going to go inside. Right there, the T-dubs come with an oil sight glass window right there, and it's got your lower level and your upper level. And I like to fill it right up to that upper level of that window. And that's where we're going. There's a lower and an upper, and your oil should be between that lower and that upper, but I like to go toward the top end of that without overfilling it, because I always believe put the most oil you can in this motor without overfilling it, because it's an air-cooled motor. It works on a hot summer day, and the more oil you have, just the more oil there is to cool down and heat up in there. So I kind of like that. That's just my philosophy anyway. All right, put the oil in there. All right, I went to the back of the shop to my oil / funnel supply area, found the appropriate funnel, and I like to clean them funnels out. If these funnels been sitting out in the open, you know, and not being used, I like to clean them inside and out before I end up shoving them in a motor of anything. It doesn't really matter. So I found the appropriate funnel. Okay, beauty. We got the end. These T-dubs have a sight glass. Another thing, when you open a fresh jug of oil, you guys, just things that I pay attention to and have learned over the years, be careful what you're doing with this foil tab in there. Just because you push the tab in there and you pull some of it out, try not to push any of that metal tab and let any of that small pieces, like this stuff here, make sure you get it all. And try not to push that foil tab, because I'm sure it's been done on several occasions where you push that foil tab right down in the oil and you don't notice it. All right, see the oil? She's climbing up in that sight glass. You'll see that oil coming into that sight glass as you pour. All right, see that oil? She's climbing up in that sight glass. Let me try and do this with a one-handed deal here. We're putting oil in her. There you go. All right. So that right there is on the upper end, and it's going down. Wait for it to drain in there, wait for it to stabilize a little bit. And the bike is quite level. It's out just a little bit, but not much. Okay, so we got that oil in there. All right, so I put in just a touch under a quart on this thing. And you've got quite a deviation from the low level line to absolute full. There's quite a bit of fluctuation for oil adding for your own personal preference. You can see that oil draw right down in that sight class when that motor fires up. All right, so we put about a quart in there, maybe a smidgen less, but they take almost a quart of oil, 1040 motorcycle oil. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning into this video, and remember, the kind of oil you put in a wet clutch on a motorcycle matters, so just don't dump in automotive oil. That's no good for your clutch. With the friction modifiers and everything's in there, that's the main thing to remember, and that's it. Depending on how much riding you do, keep that oil changed, and we're good to go. So another thing I remembered from this video too, I gotta get a small foot-pounds or even inch-pounds, and I'll convert it to foot-pounds for torquing those bolts, but I don't get too shaken up over it. I feel my way into those aluminum threads a little bit. Okay, you guys, thanks for tuning in, and the T-Dub's got fresh oil in it, and I'm ready to do some riding, some more riding. Thanks for tuning in, you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks, bye.